Please face the flag of our nation and recognize the principle for which it stands. Department 1 is now in session. The Honorable Mark E. Swindle, Judge, presiding.
Please be seated, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, in People v. Robert Durst, the defendant is present with Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. DeGuerin. We have Mr. Bailey at council table with Mr. Milius. I see Mr. Lewis, as well as Mr. Lewin, Mr. Miata, Mr. Henderson. Our jurors and alternates all are present. It's time for us to commence a new day. The people may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before I do that, we have a stipulation we read yesterday, was signed and filed this morning. May we mark this as people's, are we on 80, Madam Clerk?
We ended at
79G.
79G.
So we're 80.
80.
And for the record, it's stipulation number 62.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I call our next witness?
I see you'll be reading this.
We already read it yesterday.
Oh, I see. Right. Thanks for filing that. Yes, you may call your witness.
People call Mella Kaufman.
You may.
Please stand in the witness stand. Raise your right hand to be sworn. Do solemnly state that the testimony you may give and the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you. Please be seated. For the record, please state and spell your first and last name.
Mella Kaufman, M-E-L-L-A-K-A-U-F-M-A-N.
Thank you.
Mr. Bailey.
Thank you.
Proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Where do you live?
Portland, Oregon.
Okay. Thank you for coming down here today.
Absolutely.
How long have you lived in Portland, Oregon?
At least 20 years.
So you have a soft voice.
Oh, I'm sorry. At least 20 years.
Thank you. You can move that microphone like in front of your mouth if you'd like. And
Okay.
do your best just to speak up. It's a large courtroom.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. The woman sitting in front of you, right there,
Hi.
she's typing everything we say down.
Okay. Excellent.
She's excellent at her job, and she's very fast, but it does make it difficult when I interrupt you, and I do that sometimes, so I'm going to try my best not to do that, okay?
Okay.
And if you could please do your best, even if you think you know what my question's going to be halfway through, if you could do your best to kind of wait for me to finish, pause, and then answer, just because it makes her life a lot easier, okay?
Absolutely.
And if we do that, things I think should go pretty good from that point of view. What do you do for a living?
I'm a therapist.
And what type of therapist?
I have a counseling license, but are you asking what kind of therapy I give?
Yes.
Okay. I work with a lot of PTSD and a lot of couples issues.
Okay. For how long have you been doing that?
18 years.
And are you married?
No.
Okay. Do you, were you married at some point?
Yeah, in fact, I won't be divorced till October, so I guess I technically still am.
It's okay. Actually, it doesn't really matter. So.
Yeah.
Do you have children?
Yes.
How many children?
2.
How old are they?
4 and 6.
All right. I assume you left them behind in Portland?
I did.
Was that difficult?
Very.
Okay. Did you want to come here today?
No.
And how strongly did you express that to us over the months and years leading up to this?
Oh, over the months and years, I don't think I would have done anything to get out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember at some point Mr. Lewin asking you on a scale of, he loves scales, on a scale of 0 to 100.
Not getting on them.
It's like what Mr. Lewin said to her is hearsay, Your Honor, even though he's trying to be funny.
I'll sustain that one.
Thank you.
Well, could I, all right, forget about what Mr. Lewin said. Let me ask you.
Let's all leave that.
I'll try to channel Mr. Lewin. On a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being, oh yeah, I got there 8 hours early for my flight, and 0 being, I did not want to come at all.
Yeah.
Where would you be?
Today I'd be at a 0. Previously I had said minus 1,000.
Okay. Are there, aside from leaving your kids, which is obvious for anyone who has kids, how did you say how old your kids were?
4 and 6.
Okay, sorry. Are there other ramifications to your life of testifying in this case that you view as either negative or positive?
Objection, Your Honor, to the relevance of that.
I'm going to go to her credibility, Your Honor.
Just a moment. Overrule.
I emotionally, everything having to do with my mother's murder and this case is so difficult that approaching it at all is a something I'd rather avoid.
Okay. And it's fair to say you tried to avoid it with us, yes?
I have tried to avoid, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry for having to bring you down here, but I just have some questions we got to ask you.
Sure,
And if you don't understand something I ask you, please let me know, okay?
sure.
I'm going to be asking you about things that happened when you were younger, things that happened years ago. If you don't remember something, it's perfectly acceptable to say, I just don't remember. Do you understand that?
Yes,
If you remember part of something that's partly responsive to what I have to ask, but some parts your memory's not 100%, you can let us know that too. Do you understand that?
absolutely.
You, obviously you know why you're here today. Have you read media accounts about what has happened throughout the years?
No, I have avoided all media. I never watched the documentary. It's all been too upsetting for me. I've tried to avoid it.
Okay, but I'm assuming you've read some things about the case?
Yeah, in anticipation of coming here, I had a friend contact me maybe 1 or 2 Sundays ago. She mentioned she saw it in the paper, and I did look at that.
Okay. And if you had read something or seen something throughout the years, could you promise us that you'd be able to just kind of testify about things today from what you have seen with your own eyes?
Absolutely.
What you've heard with your own ears?
Yes.
To the best
Sorry.
of your ability, can you promise to do that?
Absolutely.
If at some point I'm asking you questions and you find that you're having a difficulty doing that, can you promise to kind of stop and take a pause and say, hold on, I'm not sure I'm able to do this right now?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know a woman named Susan Berman?
Yes.
And
Did you hear me?
I'm going to show you a photograph. Sorry. I have a photo 243. May I mark this as People's 81?
Yes.
Go from the screen in front of you.
Okay.
Do you recognize the person in that photo?
Yes.
Who is that?
Susan and myself.
Approximately how old were you in that photo?
Probably 13.
Okay. You mentioned the word mother when you referred to Susan. Was Susan your biological mother?
No.
Okay. Did you, throughout your life, think of her as your mother? Well, not your whole life, but at some point?
Yes. Very much so.
Was she related to you by blood at all?
No.
Who are your biological parents?
Judy Hamilton and Paul Kaufman.
Are they together today?
No.
At some point in your life, Were they no longer together?
Yes,
How early on in your life?
they separated when I was 2.5.
Okay. And who did you live with when they separated?
I stayed with my father and his new girlfriend, Nancy Kaslarian.
Okay. And where did you stay?
We moved from Brentwood to Venice Beach, but is that the question?
Okay.
Location.
Can you spell Kassarian?
Kaslarian, K-A-Z, maybe A-L. I haven't seen her. I don't remember. It's been,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
sorry.
So you lived in the Los Angeles area with your father?
Yes,
And that started when you were about 2.5 years old?
correct.
Okay. I think we lost a picture. It's no problem here. I'll just go on. What type of interactions did you have growing up with your biological mother?
I would see her on weekends between the ages, I believe, of maybe 6 and 13.
Okay.
Not every weekend,
Okay.
occasional weekends.
Would you describe your relationship with her as close growing up?
No,
How about Paul Kaufman? What was, growing up, how close were you to him?
not very.
How active of a parent, if he was Paul Kaufman in your life?
Not active at all, neglectful.
Okay. What did your father, growing up, to the best of your memory, do for a living?
He had various jobs. He was an actor. He had directed a movie in his youth. He worked for an insurance company at one point, I remember, when I was young. He had a improv troupe, and was doing some finance for a while.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember.
Have you previously spoken about his various careers and how he approached life in negative ways?
I've spoken about most things previously in negative ways, I would say, including that.
Okay. I have a photo. May I mark this as People's 82? 235. You recognize?
It's
The
not
people-
on my screen, but I have a reflection.
It's not on yours?
No.
Could we try the wolf?
Yes.
Is it the same machine?
I'm pretty sure it's not on hers.
Let's just try it once. Actually, I can maybe just leave it on the screen and I'll approach. That's probably the best way to do this, Sharon.
I can see it perfectly well.
Do you recognize the people in that photo?
Yes.
Who are those people?
Susan and my father, Paul Kaufman.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, 2.
And what are their names?
I'm sorry,
Who are they?
who are they? Sarab Kaufman, my older brother, and my older sister is Gretchen Ferriolo.
And how much older than you is your older sister?
10 years.
10 years older. Okay. And how about Sarah in relation to you?
2 years older.
2 years older. So you're the youngest of the family?
Yes.
All right. Where does your sister live now? What state?
In New Hampshire.
And how about Sarah?
Sarah lives in LA.
Growing up, you said your parents your biological parents separated when you were about 2.5, and you lived with your father, Paul, in Los Angeles area. I think you mentioned Brentwood and at some point moved to Venice, right?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you attend elementary school?
Canyon Elementary.
Okay. Where was that?
Down the hill from Santa Monica. I don't, that's what I remember.
Did you stay at that school your entire elementary school career?
No, I ended up going to boarding school in the 3rd or 4th grade, probably 4th grade.
Okay. Where was that boarding school?
In Ojai.
In Ojai?
Yeah.
Okay. I assume then, I mean, it's called boarding school. I assume you lived there?
I did.
And did you live there the entire school year?
Yes.
When there was a break, a holiday break or some other school break, would you stay in Ojai?
No.
What would you do?
I would return to my father's house.
How about on the summers while you were at that boarding school? Would you stay over the summers at the boarding school?
I returned to my father's house.
Okay. And who was he living with at those times when you were returning?
He had a girlfriend named Karina.
Okay. And at some point when you returned on one of those breaks, did you meet somebody new in your life?
Yes.
Who was that?
I met Susan Berman coming home to visit on weekends or holidays.
Around how old were you when you came home and here's Susan Berman in your life?
6th grade, middle of the year, probably 11.
Where was Susan living at the time when you came home and met her?
She was living in Brentwood on Coin Street.
Okay. What were the circumstances under which you met her? What was her relationship, if any, to your family?
The first time I met her.
Yeah.
She and my father had gone to Chadwick boarding school when they were younger. And she had a dear friend, Susie Harmon, and my father's best friend, Peter Harmon, were brother and sister. And so it was sort of a reintroduction for my father and her through close friends.
When you came home and you met Susan Berman, had she already formed some form of a relationship with your father?
It was in the early stages. I may have even been there the first night she was introduced for Shabbat or something.
Eventually,
she came for dinner, yeah.
My fault. Eventually, did she form a relationship with your father?
Yes.
What type of relationship was that?
First it was a friendship, and then it became romantic and quick to an engagement.
Okay. What was your first impressions of Susan as a 6th grader coming home from boarding school and you meet this woman? What was your first impressions of her?
She was really unique. You know, at that age, I wasn't necessarily terribly fascinated by all of my father's friends. But she really stood out to me. She was very different looking than, you know, my father's, not that they were dating at this time, but my father's type was really like a tall, thin blonde. Mm-hmm. And so she was very unique in her appearance to me. And then she was able to essentially send what was my father's girlfriend, Karina, to her bedroom over dinner in a subtle and socially acceptable way, which I found fascinating. So I was very, I was, you know, fascinated, interested.
I understand. What do you mean by that? Sent your father's
Karina,
girlfriend?
my father's girlfriend, who he had lived with for a couple of years, was a very cold woman. Mm-hmm. And they had created this Friday night dinner, and when they all sat down to eat, I was at the table as well. Somehow, with comments that Susan made, Karina got so upset that she rushed off to the bedroom in a huff and didn't stay for dinner, for the dinner party.
How much time passed after that where your father's girlfriend, Katrina, kind of left the picture and Susan came into the picture?
Yeah, I mean, I returned to boarding school, and that pretty much, for me, that was a blink of an eye. I don't have exact dates.
You don't know. Okay. So are you trying to explain that in some sense, through whatever Susan said or did, she was able to sort of
Yes.
I think it's leading, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Are you, I'm just trying to understand, now tell me if I'm wrong.
In other words, explaining the previous testimony and clarifying it is not leading because it's not suggesting the answer, it's identifying the answer, so overruled.
Are you saying that based on whatever Susan was able to say at that dinner table, you're sitting there as a young child with your father, his girlfriend, and his female friend, based on whatever words she was able to do, from your perception, what you saw, she was able to kind of work her way into that table and have the girlfriend removed to another room?
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit.
Sure.
Karina was a large part of the reason I went to boarding school. Not that I hated boarding school by any means. It was okay. And
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt, but
Yes.
the relevance of all of this.
I'm-
Oh, overruled. You may continue your answer.
Thank you. So I sort of saw Karina as a force on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I was, I don't know, I just keep coming back to fascinated. I was really sort of blown away, and there was a knowingness between Susan and I, like we had a knowing glance.
Are you saying that at that table when she did this, she gave you some form of a look?
Yes.
What type of look?
A sweet look, a sideways look, a look like I'm taking care of her for you.
Okay. Did you at some point, on your trips back home from boarding school, get to know Susan a little more?
Uh-huh.
Yes?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And at some point, did you come to realize this woman is going to remain a part of my life?
Yeah, I would say probably within 6 to 8 months, we had become incredibly close. And it was not long after that that she was very clear in her conversation with me that she would never disappoint me or abandon me like my other parents had.
She said that to you?
Yeah.
How long did you stay at boarding school?
Oh, she brought me back from boarding school.
When you say she, who brought you back from boarding school?
Susan had my father bring me home from boarding school.
So that was, did you want to be at boarding school?
If there was a parent there who I liked and loved, like Susan, absolutely not.
Okay. So it was Susan who basically said, your daughter's coming home and she's living back here.
Yes.
What grade were you when you came home?
Summer before 7th grade.
And where were you guys living when you came home?
I think I first came home to Kenter, the house my dad had in Brentwood on Kenter.
Mm-hmm.
And then we all moved in together likely by Christmas time, if my memory serves.
Okay. And you said, I'm sorry, the name of the street was?
Kenter.
Kenter. What city was that in?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
What city did you say that was in?
Oh, yeah, no, that's here in Brentwood.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a photo. I marked this as People's 83.
Yes.
Who did you, it's not yet. May I approach? I'm going to hand this to the witness. Who did you live with at the Cantor Street address?
My father and my brother.
How about Susan?
No.
Okay. Where was Susan at that time?
We were all becoming a family. It was probably a 6-month period. She lived on Coyne Street in Brentwood.
In Brentwood?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recognize the people in People's 83?
Yes.
Is that Susan and your father? And who's that young woman with that hairstyle in the middle?
That's me.
Okay.
Yes, that's Susan, my father, and me in the middle.
Do you have any way of knowing, could you estimate how old you were in that photo? Do you know? Based on your hairstyle or your clothes or?
Yes, that was likely, that was likely 7th grade, so maybe that following year, from when I came, sometime in the following year that I came back from boarding school.
I know it's kind of hard to be, what's the word? I think it's the right word, retrospective, like to examine yourself.
Right.
Introspective.
Introspective, right. There you go. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Retro would be like in the past. Introspective. What, if you can, I don't know if you can or not, but if you try to think back at yourself as you were, your personality was, as you appeared at that period in your life, do you think you were an easy teenager for a woman to come into your family and deal with?
I think she was up to the challenge, but yeah, no, I had a lot of inconsistency, and it was hard for me to trust family.
Okay. And when you first met her, did you trust her?
No.
Did your relationship with her develop over time?
Yes.
How close did you guys become?
Mother and daughter plus, I would say.
Describe the kinds of things Susan would do with you growing up.
Well, there was so much. We did homework together. We sat at the kitchen table and talked endlessly. We went out to dinner together. We went to yoga. She would read all sorts of books and hand them on to me. We'd watch series and movies together. We'd go to library to work on a school project. She would involve me in her work projects. I think she wanted to see if it would spark interest or just expose me. We ran errands together. I went with her on errands.
Was Susan as close to your brother Sarah?
He's different. They had a different relationship, and I can't pretend to know the emotional component.
Who spent more time with Susan?
Yeah, me. My father and my brother, in a way, were like we came back home to them for an occasional dinner, kind of thing, or for family vacations or holidays. They weren't as active.
Okay. How involved was Susan in your life, and how could you best describe that?
Can we get a time frame that we're talking about here, please?
Yes, please clarify the time.
Sure. So as a young child, after she moved in and formed this relationship with you and was doing homework with you and taking you, so I'm talking about your elementary school years that you knew her up until your high school years. How close? So
from 11 until I went off to college.
Yeah.
We were, and after I went off to college even, but until I went off to college, we were inseparable, and it was a crazy involvement to the point where, I actually felt extremely controlled.
Okay. Did you feel extremely controlled? When did that feeling start?
Likely around 16.
Okay. Your children are young, but I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I'm telling you, it's not abnormal that there's that friction between them. You would understand that?
Yes.
Was there some periods of friction between you and Susan throughout her life?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure we'll talk about some of that, but putting that friction aside, from your perspective, based on what you saw about Susan, how committed was she to you?
Yeah, 100%. I felt like her #1 priority.
How much from your perspective, based on what you saw and experienced, how much did she love you?
I felt extremely loved.
Did you get those feelings from your father?
No.
How much time did your father, well, I already asked you that, but who spent more time with you, your father or Susan?
Susan.
Who gave you more advice?
Susan.
In your teen years, who was the greatest parent figure in your life?
Susan.
And is it a fair statement that you were closer to Susan than either your biological mother or your father?
Absolutely. She was my only parent.
Did you continue to live in that Brentwood apartment with your father?
No, it was a house, and no, we all moved into her house. That was probably when I was about 12, before 7th grade.
Where was that house?
And her house was on Coyne in Brentwood.
So that's when you were around how old?
12.
Okay.
Probably just 12.
And do you remember what year it was the first time you lived with her? Did you previously say it was around the summer of '87?
I'd have to do the math.
That's fine. You were 12. That's fine.
Yeah.
And how long did you live there on Coyne Street with Susan?
Probably 4 years.
And who lived there in that house with you during that period of time?
For 3.5 of those years, possibly, or 3 of those years, my brother and my father as well.
And Susan?
And Susan, yes.
And where did you guys move next?
Susan and I moved to a condo on Altaloma in Hollywood.
Okay. And it was just you and Susan?
Yes.
Where did your brother go at that time?
I remember him being in San Francisco. I think at some point he came back to LA and maybe stayed with my dad for a while, but I don't know. I wasn't very aware of what they were doing.
So had Susan and your father separated at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Was this before or after they eventually went to New York?
This is after.
After, okay. So I'm mixing up the time periods a little bit. We'll get back to the New York thing in a minute, but you lived with Susan alone at Altaloma?
Correct.
Okay. And this is going into your high school years?
Yes.
All right. And at some point, did Susan or your father leave the Los Angeles area?
Yes.
Okay.
When I was around 15, we all lived on Coyne Street in Brentwood.
Okay.
And Susan and my father went to live in New York for a period of time for their play. They were attempting to get a play on Broadway or something, The Dreyfus Affair.
Okay. So Susan and your father went to New York to try to produce this play, The Dreyfus Affair?
Correct.
And where did you stay when that happened?
I stayed Brentwood on Coyne Street.
And what about Sarah?
That's when I believe he went to San Francisco.
Okay. How old were you at the time?
I was 15.
So was anyone living with you on Coyne Street?
Not for that period of time. Susan would come back and visit. I don't know how long of a period it was.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Approximately how long was it that they were gone in New York and you were kind of left back be home?
It couldn't have been a full school year, but how much of that year I don't know. So I would sort of guess 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
It might have been less. Honestly, I don't remember.
And would your father check on you while he was gone?
No.
Would Susan check on you while you were gone?
Yeah, I think we spoke daily.
Okay. So she'd call you every day on the phone?
Yeah.
How often did your father call you?
No, never.
Did Susan send you money
Yes.
while she was gone?
Yes.
And would Susan come back to Los Angeles to check on you periodically?
Yeah, I think probably at least every 3 weeks. I mean, it may have been a 3-month period of time, and she'd come back every 3 weeks. Somewhere.
Yeah, you don't have an exact memory of the exact amount of time they were gone.
Right, I don't. Sorry.
Okay.
But yes, she would come back.
Who would come back to see you and visit you while they were gone more, Susan or your father?
My father never came back. Susan came back for long weekends.
Financially, what was Susan's life like at the point where her and her father left and go to New York to work on this musical?
She was wealthy.
Okay. Did she have any problems providing things you needed?
No.
Did she ever hesitate to spend money on you?
No.
Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, she had lived a wealthy and lavish, no financial stress, and she actually it was a big shock for me when I first lived with her how much money she was constantly spending on me, and it was kind of wild. I eventually kind of got used to it.
Okay. When they went and left you and went to New York to work on this project, how did the project go?
Didn't happen. She came back and they were breaking up.
Okay. Did they both come back?
No, my father stayed in New York.
Before I expand upon that, I have a photo. May I mark this as People's 83, Your Honor?
Yeah, 84.
I'm sorry, 84. And another one, may I mark this as People's 85?
Yeah.
84 is 240. This is People's 84. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, who is that in that photo?
That is left to right is me, Susan, and Sarah.
All right. And then if you look at People's 85.
Same. Me, Susan, and Sarah.
So when Susan came home, I asked you and I apologize, did you say your father did or didn't come home?
He did not.
Did you stay in Los Angeles after this thing fell apart, the Dreyfus Affair project? Immediately did you stay at home, or did you even, for some period, go to New York?
I think I went to see my father for a week in New York, and I was aware that it was a possibility for me to live with him, which I felt pretty certain was not going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. And did you express what your desires were at that time?
Yeah. When Susan came back from New York and they had a fight, I remember we were sitting in the park and the dogs were running around, and before she could even really get it out, I said, well, obviously I'm staying with you, which, she was pretty thrilled about and tearful. And
what was her demeanor when you told her, you know what, I want to stay with you?
She was touched and relieved.
Did she appear to you to be relieved?
I'm sorry?
Did she appear relieved to you?
Maybe she was. There was a deep gratitude in our relationship as mother and daughter, having both kind of been orphans and found each other. So it was more like a gratitude and a overwhelm.
Did she ever hesitate at all to take you as her child and take you to her home?
I never considered that it would be anything but.
And from her reactions and her responses to you, did it appear to you that she ever considered it would be anything but, of course, you're going to live with me?
Right. I should say it more clearly. We were sort of, to take a moment to find the right words, but our relationship, her being able to be a mother, me being able to be a daughter, was really precious. And I probably, like with the biological mom, she wouldn't have assumed that I would go elsewhere, and neither would I.
Mm-hmm.
Except for I can see where maybe she had a little trepidation or fear since she didn't have legal custody.
Sure. What kind of reaction did you get, if you got any reaction, from your father when it was decided that you're just going to come back to Los Angeles and live with Susan?
It was never a discussion.
So did you move back to Los Angeles?
Yeah. I had just been in New York for a week on sort of a trial. I don't remember the circumstances. It seems odd.
Okay.
I'm not sure why we were even going through that pretense, but yeah, I returned quickly.
And your father, did he return to Los Angeles or did he stay in New York?
He stayed in New York, and I don't actually know exactly when he returned.
Okay. How much relationship or contact did you have with your father from that point forward for the next 10 years up until Susan's death?
Yeah, probably 3 times.
Okay. Did you, you guys lived in Alta Loma when you came back?
Yes.
And did you eventually finish high school?
Yes.
And did you go to college?
Yes.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Oregon.
How supportive or not supportive was Susan in your decision to go to college and the University of Oregon?
There was not an option for me to not go to college, and she was supportive of my choice.
When you say it was not an option, who was it not an option for?
Yes, there was, that just wasn't part of the expectations.
From Susan?
Yes.
While you were at the University of Oregon, to the best of your memory, where was Sarah living?
I don't know.
Okay. When you came home, well,
He was in LA. He was living in LA.
Did you come home for breaks and summers while you were at the University of Oregon?
Yes.
Where would you stay when you came home?
With Susan.
Did she live at Alta Loma address the entire time that you were in the University of Oregon?
No, freshman year she lived at Alta Loma, and by my sophomore year she had moved to Benedict Canyon.
Okay, and is that the home where she was eventually killed?
Yes.
So when you would come home on breaks, would you stay at that home with her?
Yes.
And was that at 1537 Benedict Canyon?
Yes.
I want to ask you some questions about your memories of Susan's personality, okay?
Okay.
And first, let me just ask you generally. Would you sit here today and say that all of Susan's personality traits were positive?
No.
Do you have memories of some of her negative personality traits?
Yes.
I hope you don't mind, but let me ask you about some of the positives first, okay?
Yes. Okay.
Can you just describe for this jury, to the best of your ability, what were some of the best personality traits that Susan Berman had?
She had an unbelievable awareness for the value of too vague but human connection or relationships. She had a depth of love for those who were friends and family that was, and just an appreciation of how precious those relationships were. That was I don't know, remarkable. Very. I think anyone would be sort of stunned. It would not be your average person at all. She also was very bright and very entertaining, and incredibly supportive.
What do you mean by entertaining?
She was a lot of fun, and she was a great storyteller. She also was, I wanted to say socially graceful, but that's not right. She was socially very effective. I don't know. So she had a way of drawing you out of yourself and making it a really good time. And she was a lot of fun to talk to. Lots of laughing.
As a teenager growing up,
Uh-huh.
and you were, I think you described you did so many things with her. Would she cart you around pretty much everywhere she went?
Yes.
How fun did she make that for you? Some people go take their kids around with them doing their work, and it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to go.
No, it was all just awesome. Whether we were sitting at the kitchen table till 2 in the morning on a school night, laughing after, or driving in her car on an errand, it all had a depth of sweetness and love, and then extreme entertainment.
How smart was she?
I'd say she's pretty much brilliant. I mean, she was very, very bright.
I'm sorry? How either focused and motivated or not focused and motivated was she?
She would get incredibly focused and was insanely motivated. So there just kind of was no such thing as Susan not getting what she focused on.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, she was incredibly effective in what she went after.
From the Susan that you knew and all the time you spent with her, how often was Susan successful in getting what she set her mind to get?
Seemed like pretty much all the time until the very end with some business stuff.
How did you hear the last part?
She got pretty much everything she put her mind to until the very end when she was having issues with business.
Okay. This was close to her time of death?
Yes.
How determined was Susan to achieve her goal once she set her mind on something?
Yeah, completely. Unwavering. Screw your courage to the sticking point was her saying.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Screw your courage to the sticking point.
Did she ever explain to you what she meant by that?
Well, it was self-explanatory.
Okay. Let's now talk about some of Susan's, what you perceived as negative qualities.
Okay.
What were some of her negative qualities?
She was incredibly manipulative, fearful, extremely controlling, and could be pretty dysregulated.
Dysregulated?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
She wasn't always able to contain her emotions or her, I don't want to say mental health, but to some extent, she could be laid up with a migraine in bed for many days. She could, she would soar high when she was going after something, and she could collapse. She was prone to collapsing.
Okay.
She's prone to collapses?
Yeah, more
I
emotional.
just didn't hear your words.
Okay.
When you say collapses, you were answering the judge. You said something about more emotionally.
More emotional collapses, yeah.
Okay. And have you previously described Susan as potentially she could be vindictive if someone did something that she didn't like?
Oh, yes. That was actually what I considered her worst quality.
Okay.
She was incredibly vindictive.
Okay.
It was disturbing to me.
I want to first, let's go through, you mentioned some things. Let's talk about, you said she was extremely controlling.
Yes.
How much control, from your perspective, did Susan need to have in any given situation?
100%.
What do you mean by that?
There was no room for anybody else to have a voice or to have any control over absolutely any part of something she was involved in.
Let's assume that Susan was going to be involved with someone else in some form of a plan to do something.
Uh-huh.
Was she the type of person who would take any kind of directions from someone?
No, in fact, directions could lead to cutting off the relationship.
What about in crisis situations? What was she like in crisis situations? Say a friend had some crisis. From your perspective, your experience. Well, let me take a step back. Did you ever have any crises growing up?
Yes.
Were you present when Sarah had crises around her growing up?
Yes.
Do you have experience of how Susan handled crises?
Yeah, it was a constant with all the friends and people in her life. She was handling their crises as well.
And you were with her, right next to her during all this?
Yes. If I wasn't hearing it myself, she was telling me everything about it.
And can you describe for the jury, what was Susan like when a friend had a crisis?
100% committed, there to take over and to fix it.
Would Susan, if there was a crisis and there was going to be a solution to this crisis, who would come up with the solution?
Susan would.
How much did she listen to other people's input on how to handle this crisis?
I never really witnessed her being able to tolerate that.
If there was a crisis with a close friend, and Susan were going to somehow get involved in helping to come up with a solution to that crisis, based on your experience, your life experience with Susan, how confident are you that she will be the one stepping up, taking charge, calling the shots, trying to figure out what we're going to do?
100%.
You discussed that she was extremely manipulative.
Yes.
How manipulative was she?
I don't know how to even really explain it. I definitely feel that she felt that it was a requirement for her survival. And so that could extend to anything from a parking attendant to my teacher to something to do with work to her friends in need. She was manipulative with most of the world from what I saw, besides, I don't want to say she completely wasn't manipulative with me, but she didn't wear that same protective sort of manipulation with me.
Was there anyone in your life that you've ever known who was more manipulative than Susan Berman?
No.
Did you ever see Susan manipulate her friends?
Yes.
Did you see her manipulate her closest friends?
I know the answer is yes. I can't recall a specific instance off the top of my head, but the answer is yes.
Based on the Susan Berman that you knew and your life experiences with her, in your opinion, would it be within Susan's character to manipulate even her best, closest friend to get something that she really felt she needed?
Yes. Yes.
Did you ever learn about Susan's upbringing?
Of course.
And who did you learn about that from?
From Susan.
So all these questions I'm going to ask you about her upbringing and her mentality growing up, what she learned. I want you to tell us things that you know because Susan told you growing up throughout the years, okay?
Okay.
I don't want you to tell us about things you saw on TV shows or heard from other people or read anywhere.
Yeah,
I just want you to
there's
tell
not
us.
much of that. I'm sorry.
I just want you to tell us about things that Susan told you growing up, okay?
Yes.
Did she ever tell you what her childhood was like?
Yes.
What did she say?
Well, she grew up with a mobster father and a mother who was collapsed, emotionally collapsed. She grew up in the Flamingo Hotel, and, you know, she had a very lavish life. She was treated like a princess. And father was everything to her. Not that she didn't adore her mom, but her mom was not well.
Okay. You said her father was everything to her?
Yes,
How often would she talk about her father?
all the time.
What kinds of things would she say about him?
She mainly would agonize about, I don't know, she mainly would express love and grief and a honoring, loyalty, a respect maybe.
Okay. And when you say your father was a mobster,
Yes.
did she tell you about how he was involved in the mob in Las Vegas and he was living at she was living in the Flamingo Hotel with him? And
Yeah, and she told me, and I read her book early on about, discovering that he was a mobster, and she told me about her birthday parties, and she told me how she felt. She told me about her mean grandmother, who she kicked in the shins for calling her mom a shiksa. She told me about going into doing things to entertain herself at the Flamingo. I don't.
did she tell you, you mentioned birthday parties. How would she describe her childhood birthday parties growing up?
Lavish. She specifically, I remember her specifically saying that there were like rooms full of gifts where she just couldn't even get through them all. And that, Liberace came to one of her birthdays and performed, and just, this very lavish life.
Did she tell you whether she had any bodyguards?
Yes, she grew up with bodyguards. Yes.
Did she tell you she would do stuff with them socially growing up?
Yeah. They would drive her around. She'd hang out with them. They might play cards. They'd order room service.
Did you ever discuss with Susan, based on this lifestyle, growing up a mobster's daughter, playing cards with bodyguards, having Liberace play at her birthday party, this whole mentality that she had growing up and experiences she had growing up, did you ever have discussions with her about what that did for her in terms of giving her a sense of loyalty?
No.
Did you ever, based on these discussions you had with her and your experiences you had with her, did you form opinions as to what her sense of loyalty was?
Yeah.
Asked and answered, Your Honor. She said no.
Overruled.
Yeah, go ahead, tell us.
Yeah, she was one of the most loyal people I've ever known. Loyalty came first. Loyalty came first with Susan. Maybe right after whatever she felt she had to do to survive, in terms of manipulation. But she was incredibly loyal, and I sort of deduced at one point that that likely came from her morals and her upbringing. I mean, there was a mobster-like loyalty. It wasn't about right or wrong. It was just about loyalty.
Are you saying that with Susan, it wasn't necessarily about right or wrong, it was more about loyalty?
Yes.
The Susan that you knew, was she more concerned with what was right or wrong, or was she more concerned with being loyal to her friends?
Loyal to her friends.
Have you mentioned the word gangster. Have you previously described Susan as having a gangster mentality?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, do you think she had like a gangster type of mentality?
Ish. Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't have seen it that way having been raised by her until I have seen such different experiences now in the world.
Given the loyalty that you knew Susan to have with her friends, if a friend came to her and had a problem and needed help, would she help?
Always.
What if this problem involved a criminal act they had committed?
Sustain.
Have you ever been around Susan when someone had done something criminal and she stepped in to help them out?
Always.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this.
Overruled.
Yeah, always. In fact, if someone were in that kind of trouble,
Your Honor, no foundation, and it's really irrelevant to the...
Okay, I'm going to sustain that objection.
I can lay
The
more.
answer may stand. Clarify with,
Sure.
With a different question.
Sure. What type of situations were you present for where someone close to Susan had problems with the law? What types of situations?
well, there were a few with my brother.
Did your brother get involved in some situations with the law?
Yeah, he was working at Chin Chin's or something and was stealing credit cards. He stole a car and had a 15-car pileup.
Okay.
She got him out of those situations.
So,
I'm not sure they heard. You said she got
She
him out?
got him, she was completely dedicated to getting him out and getting his record expunged. In fact, they went to a really fabulous attorney who didn't think that he could get him off, and so she fired him and found someone else and did eventually get him off. And my father was not in support of doing this for my brother, but Susan did it.
okay.
So I just wanted you to keep your voice up when you answer.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you. Okay.
I guess the question I have for you is, did Susan ever help, in your experience, did she ever hesitate in your experience to help someone close to her with a problem, even if they had done something wrong?
Never hesitated. There wasn't even a sense of it being right or wrong. It was just an issue of taking care of a loved one's problem.
Okay. Did Susan have dogs while you knew her and lived at Benedict Canyon?
Yes.
Do you remember their names?
Yeah. She had her dog Lulu had a breed when we were on Coin Street. By the time she was on Benedict Canyon, she had 3 of them: Romeo, Golda, and Lulu.
Okay. I have a photograph. May I mark this as, are we in 86?
Yes.
People's 86?
Yes.
I have another photograph. May I mark this as People's 87?
You may.
And a final photograph. May I mark this as People's 88?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you first what's been marked as People's 86. You see that up there?
Yes.
Would you like me to hand you? You don't have to keep track.
That's okay.
You sure?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that Susan there?
Yes.
What house is that? Do you recognize that house?
It's Coin Street in Brentwood.
Okay. I'm going to show you now.
Coin is C-O-Y-N-E. C-O-Y-N-E.
I believe so. It might be a K. I can't remember. Sorry. Long time ago now.
Okay, thanks.
Your Honor, we'll stipulate that coin, or the court can take judicial notice that coin is spelled C-O-Y-N-E.
Right. That's fine. It's just a matter of reporting it accurately.
That's fine, Your Honor.
So I'm showing you what's now been marked as People's 87. 215. Do you recognize who that is?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's Susan and Lulu.
And where is this? The Coin Street
This
home?
is, yeah, the Coin Street house.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's 88. 224. Who is that?
Lulu and Susan.
How much did Susan either like or not like her dogs?
She adored her dogs.
How much did she adore her dogs?
I don't even know how to reasonably answer that. You know, my old clothes, or just clothes I left behind for college, were used to clean up their messes. It's like the dogs were, I don't know how to even explain it. You know?
They meant a lot to her?
They meant a lot to her, yeah.
Did she keep them all together, usually?
Meaning she would, no. They couldn't, by Benedict Canyon, they really couldn't be in the same room. I think partially that time on Alta Loma and that condo, they got pretty cooped up, and they're high maintenance dogs, lots of energy.
What were they like, the dogs?
You know, extremely yippy, loud, and tons of pent-up energy, and they were sort of prone to attacking each other by the time she lived on Benedict Canyon.
Okay.
And so she kept them in separate rooms
When,
most of the time.
sorry, my fault. When someone would come to the front door or knock on the door, how would the dogs react?
They would just freak out. Yeah, it was chaos.
And when you say chaos, we're talking about barking.
Barking, attacking each other. They could have to be rushed to the vet. Like one would bite the other in the jugular. I don't know. They had gone crazy at that point. It was just insane.
Sounds like you're describing the courtroom sometimes when jurors aren't here, but I'm joking. If someone was in the home who wasn't normally in the home, how would the dogs react?
Yeah, chaos.
Based on your knowledge of those dogs, if I were to tell you, I'm going to give you a hypothetical. I'm going to get your reaction from it, okay?
Okay.
Susan Berman was in her house in the morning, and she bent down to pick something up, and there was a stranger in her house, and the dogs were there, and she had no idea the stranger was in the house. What would your reaction be?
What would the dog's reaction
No,
be?
what would your reaction be to that hypothetical? That Susan could be unaware of a stranger in her house.
Oh, yeah, no, that's not possible. The dogs would have just absolutely lost it.
Did the dogs wear leashes?
Always.
When you say always, what do you mean by that?
You know, by the time we were on Benedict Canyon, they really had gone kind of nuts. Not in a cute way. And she handled it by having a leash on each one and putting them in separate rooms. And so the leashes were always there so she could, you know, separate.
Okay. So if Susan, one of these dogs had a leash on it, would that mean that Susan had taken him for a walk?
No.
How often did Susan walk these dogs outside of the away from the property?
Benedict Canyon, that's 0.
Okay. She never took him for walks?
Not from there, no. There weren't streets and stuff. There weren't sidewalks, rather.
I have a photograph. May I mark this as People's 89?
Yeah.
Is that Susan Berman?
Yes.
Okay. You talked about these stories before we move on to the next topic. You talked about Susan talking to you about her childhood. Did she ever show you pictures from her childhood?
Yeah, I grew up with them all over the walls, blown up.
Okay. I'm going to show you some pictures. I just want to see if you recognize them, okay?
Okay.
I have a photo. May I mark this as People's 90, Your Honor?
I'm sorry, what have we done with 89, though?
Oh,
You just identified that it's Susan Berman?
yeah, just identified as Susan Berman.
Okay.
Well, do you know where this picture was taken?
Yes and no. I can deduce because of the outfit and what she was doing work-wise at the time, but I was not there. I know the other ones.
Okay. All right. I have a stack of photos. I marked them as People's 90, People's 91, People's 92, and People's 93.
Yes.
All right, I'm showing you what's been marked as People's 90. Do you recognize that photo?
Yes.
What is this a photo of?
It's her father, her, and her mother.
Okay. Do you know where this photo was taken?
Likely at the Flamingo Hotel having dinner.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's 91. Do you recognize this photo?
Yeah, father and other gangsters.
Which one is the father?
Second from the left.
Okay. So there's one gentleman kind of holding his hand up at an angle in front of him. It's the gentleman seated right next to him.
Correct.
Okay. Showing you what's been marked as People's 92. Do you recognize this picture?
Yes.
Who's this a picture of?
Her father, Davy, Gladys, and Susan.
Okay. And did Susan refer to him and tell you he'd previously been called Davy the Jew, Berman?
I did know about that. I do know about that.
Okay. I'm showing you what's marked as People's 93. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And is this another photo?
Susan and her father.
Okay. And these photos that I've just shown you, People's 90 through People's 93, are these all photos that Susan Berman shared with you growing up and that were blown up and put on your walls?
Yes.
Did you, what was your relationship with Susan just prior to her death?
It was very estranged. She had cut off contact with me.
The word is strange.
I think you said estranged?
Estranged. She had cut off contact with me because as I was individuating in college, I decided to go visit my biological sister in New Hampshire for the first time, and it was cutting into half of the break where I would return home. And she was outraged and ended the relationship. I likely could have mended, but I was pretty stubborn at the time.
Before the relationship was just ended at that period, did Susan try to at all manipulate you to get you to not go there and stay with her?
I mean, by saying that she was no longer my mother, I'd say that was a pretty strong manipulation
Yeah.
attempt.
How long of a period did you go without speaking to Susan before her death?
Probably a year and a half.
Did you ever know anyone named Robert Durst?
Yes.
And did you ever meet him?
Yes.
Would Susan talk to you about him?
Yes.
Let's pause for a second because it's not connected. Let's make sure that he can hear. Okay.
At this point.
You know, we could take our break. So we take a 15-minute break for our reporter, and we'll take care of our technical problems also right now.
Okay.
So do not discuss your testimony with any other witness. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, 15-minute break until, well, we'll go actually until 10:40. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case.